Go the Distance, Chapter 12, Hard Truths. What did you say to him? Phil came up behind her. I told you to be nice. Not a word, Meg insisted. Phil covered his pointed ears with his hands as the baby's wails reached a fever pitch. That only made Aggius cry harder. Well, make it stop already. It's giving me a headache. You think I know how to make a baby stop crying? I know nothing about babies. Well, you know him. Make him stop it. Phil motioned to Aggius, who had tears streaming down his face, his sobs so heavy his whole body was shaking. Now she was worried he was going to drop the thing. Baby, child. There was really no time for such added bumps in the road. Aggius? Meg tried, but he kept crying, holding the baby to his chest as they both heaved great sobs. Aggius? He leaned back against the doorway and closed his eyes, crying harder. Why, my gods, why? He railed to the heavens, and his arms looked like they might drop. Meg swooped in and snatched the child from him just as Aggius collapsed against the doorframe. The baby registered that Meg was holding it and started to scream louder. Meg held it under the armpits as if it might bite her. She'd never held a baby before in her life. Aggius had talked about his siblings as children and how much he wanted kids of his own, but truthfully, Meg had never felt that pull. Her mother's life had been hard, and having a kid to provide for had made it even harder. Her own circumstances hadn't been much better. Even when she met Aggius, they had gotten by, but they weren't wealthy by any means. She couldn't imagine bringing a child into the mix. And now here she was, holding Aggius's baby in her arms. His, and of course, Katarina's. The child had her light hair and his eyes. As much as Meg had tried to deny it at the time, Hades had been right. Aggius didn't love her. He hadn't mourned for her. He had moved on immediately and created a family with Katarina, forgetting she had even existed. The truth felt as painful as the wound still healing on both her legs. She wanted to wish the pain away, but it was currently in her arms screaming. Could she put the baby down somewhere? Why was it crying so hard? How did she make it stop? Now its tears were plopping onto her arms and her whole body felt numb. Phil reached up. Give the kid to me. Gladly. Meg handed Phil the baby, and he cradled it in his arms, making a shushing sound as he rocked it back and forth. Amazingly, the child stopped wailing. The baby started to close its eyes, still sniffling as if it was being rocked to sleep. Phil marched past the sobbing Aggius into the house. Aggius and Meg followed. My child, Aggius said through his sobs. Relax, Papa, Phil told him. I have no interest in taking the kid. I just wanted to be quiet. This baby needs a nap. Ah, and here's what we need right now. Phil spotted a small wooden crib near the window and laid the child in it. Then he gave the cradle a rock for good measure. He looked at Aggius. Now you two can talk in peace. I need air, Aggius said, wiping his eyes as he walked back to his front door. Meg marveled at Phil. How did you do that? Satyr, we've got the magic touch. I was the oldest of 4. I looked after the little ones, Phil said proudly. I've always loved babies. Meg thought they seemed like a lot of work. I was an only child, she said. I looked after myself. Well, now you need to worry about that one, Phil motioned to Aggius, who was walking ahead. Go talk to him, and do it quietly so he doesn't wake the kid. Meg sighed and followed Aggius out the door, watching as he moved through the gardens near the house. How she was going to get through this conversation when all she wanted to do was wring his neck. Aggius, she said as calmly as she could muster, I need to talk to you. My child, he started to say, walking back to the house. The baby is safe with Phil, Meg said dismissively. He's practically a nursemaid. Her response only made Aggius cry again. She, on the other hand, found herself growing angrier. How dare he weep at the sight of her? He was the one who had betrayed her, who's repaid her biggest sacrifice for him by starting a family with another. She thought of her mother's words. Trust yourself. Perhaps if she had done more of that, she wouldn't be in this ridiculous mess in the first place. She would be asking some random man about his lost wife to complete Hera's quest. In any case, she would not allow him to waste the little time she had with false tears. Enough is enough, Meg said under her breath, spinning around by him in front of his chiton. Aggius, stop at once, she shouted. As soon as they made eye contact, he rubbed the wetness from his eyes. How is this possible? He asked, sounding shaken. I'd say you were a ghost, but you arrived with a satyr and a winged horse. Am I dreaming, Miss Megara, or have you come back from the dead?" "I'm alive," she said stonily. "No thanks to you." Aegeus threw his hands in the air. "Thank the gods! The sacrifices and prayers I've made have finally been answered. You are okay." He reached out to touch her face, and she stepped back. "What do you think you're doing?" Meg asked, outraged. Aegeus shook his head, his eyes still brimming. "I'm sorry. I never thought I'd see your face again. I can't believe you've returned to us after all this time." Us? Did he mean him and his wife, Katarina? What was Aegeus playing at? She knew Phil would tell her to stick to the script and get the goods on Katarina, but she couldn't help herself. "Returned? Don't act as if you're happy that I've come back. You abandoned me," Meg shouted, and Aegeus winced. "The moment I was gone, you moved on and got yourself a wife." Aegeus flattened himself against an olive tree, as if pushed by the force of her words. "I made a deal with Hades to save your life. You don't wonder where I was gone when you were suddenly well enough to rise from bed? You just followed the next woman who crossed your path. I gave up my soul for you." "What?" Aegeus gaped. "Meg, in that moment I was out of the picture. You married Katarina." Meg spat. "So much for wanting to spend your life with me. I saw it with my own eyes. Hades showed me everything." "Hades?" He shook his head once more and let out an anguished cry. I don't understand." She wouldn't be swayed by his pain. She had enough of her own in the past to last 3 lifetimes. He needed to know how much he'd hurt her. She had given up everything for him. What a fool she'd been. "And now to find you in our dream home with a child?" Meg felt hot tears touch her cheeks. "This was supposed to be ours. I saved every coin I had to help you buy wood and materials for this place, and the minute I was gone, you went and built it for your new love? You aren't worth the dirt beneath my sandals." "No, Meg, please, just listen to me," Aegeus begged. He reached for her hands, but again she pulled away. "Why should I?" Meg snarled. "So that you can spin more lies? I'm the one doing the talking now." Meg paused, realizing she was doing the very thing Athena had warned her against, getting distracted. She took a deep breath, focusing. "Look, I am only here for one reason. For myself. I need you to tell me all you know about Katarina." It sounded ridiculous even to her, but now that the true purpose of her visit was in the open, she crossed her arms, waiting. The sooner she could get over with this, the better. Aegeus's eyes widened. "Katarina? How do you know my wife?" "She's the reason I'm here." Meg stood a little bit taller. "Hera has sent me on a quest to retrieve her soul from the underworld." "You're gonna bring her back?" Aegeus put his head in his hands and sobbed even harder. She couldn't take this crying, the reminiscing, the painful reminders of her old life. She was clearly getting nowhere with Aegeus, and had no desire to comfort him. This sort of thing wasn't her bag. She needed to think. Before she knew it, she was racing out of the garden. She heard Phil calling her, but she didn't care. She whistled for Pegasus, and the horse landed at her side. "Get me out of here," Meg said, climbing onto the back and taking off into the sky. She didn't look back.